just a couple words about myself before you spend the whole 20 minutes thinking about where this accent and name is coming from. I am originally Hungarian, but I have been in Israel for 10 years. I have a degree from physics and mathematics in Hungary. Then I studied 6 years Talmud, which is late antiquities Jewish law text in Jerusalem. Then I worked 2 years in the JPSCA in Tzar Balei Chaim as a vet technician. And for the last 3 years, I have been an analyst at Riskified, dealing with fraud, which I'm very excited about. But one thing that's very important to know about myself, about me, is that I grew up in NGOs. I grew up in nonprofit organizations, volunteering and working there since I was a teenager. So what I'm going to talk about today is something that's actually very important to me and something that I feel very passionate about. If you have any questions or comments, as Billy said, please send it in the chat, and in the end of my talk, we will have a chance to talk about it. So the agenda for today is like a little bit, I'm going to talk about fraud in general in the world, and we are going to talk about who is likely to fall victim to fraud, talk a little bit about how it affects underprivileged communities, some stories from Riskified and other companies, a little bit about Corona, because in 2020 May you cannot not talk about Corona, and in the end I want to a little bit just talk about how you can help, how you can take part in fighting. So a couple words about Riskify, just so you understand how we fit into this story, how we fit into this ecosystem. Riskified is a startup with over 500 employees between Tel Aviv and New York. At the core, we are a fraud prevention company, which means we work with e-commerce merchants, analyzing their orders and deciding whether they are fraudulent or not. But in the last couple of years, we have a more diverse suite of products, which means that we accompany the customer throughout the whole online e-commerce lifecycle, and we offer account protection, alternative payment methods, chargeback guarantee, which is still our bread and butter product, and standalone representment, which is a post-decision debate about the chargeback that has already been submitted. So when I talk about Riskified and fraud in the Riskified ecosystem, it is credit card fraud. But when you think about fraud in the world, fraud is huge and fraud is everywhere. If I ask you whether your credit card has been stolen, if you are from the fraud fighters, your answer will be yes. If you are a normal person or a data scientist, your answer will be yes, in case you have seen your credit card charged with a fraudulent order. But us in the fraud world, we know that every single credit card has been stolen in the world. Okay, your credit card has been stolen, even if you don't know about it. If you don't know about it, it's because companies like Riskified and the banks and the merchants have stopped the fraudulent orders from being placed. Just so you have a feeling of how huge is fraud, the cost to fraud yearly is over $5 trillion, which is higher than Japan's GDP. And research says that if we actually worked on it as we would have do everything in order to stop it, we could stop around 40% of these losses. It's over $2 trillion a year. It's huge. And the loss to fraud is growing. In the last 10 years, it has grown by over 50%, and it's not stopping anytime soon. And it's international. There is a whole market. If you have ever been on the dark web, you know that Russians and Ukrainians are offering a full service fraud product where you hardly have to do anything in order to enter the fraud world with bots and malware and everything that you might need. Okay, but from all the frauds that you can imagine, what I want to talk about today is not the average credit card fraud that you see when your credit card is stolen and someone places an order. What I want to talk about today is more the social engineering, the scams, the directed attacks against communities, because I think that's a much more interesting part of fraud. Okay, so there is going to be, if Zoom cooperates with us, there is going to be a little survey popping up now asking you about who do you think is more likely to fall victim of fraud. So what do you think, what personality traits do you think correlate with being a victim of fraud? And this is a multiple choice question if Zoom is cooperating. So you can see what you have voted for. You have voted 57% said that willingness to take risks, 54% someone who experienced a recent loss, and then outgoing, patient, and neurotic. So actually, well, we are fraud fighters after all. You are very, very correct. People who are willing to take risks are much more likely to be victims of fraud. Why is that? It's because if you think about legitimate investment opportunities like the stock market, they are just frauds that we have agreed, all of us, that they are legitimate. The stock market and a fake investment scam are very, very similar, and they are going to talk to very similar personality types. Another thing that makes you very likely to fall victim of fraud is if you're easily persuaded. I don't think there is a lot to open there. People who are easily persuaded by the fact that this sale is only for 45 minutes or that you will never have an opportunity like this again are very likely to fall victim to some kind of attack or social engineering against them. The third one, I think, which is a bit more interesting, and I can see that a lot of you know about this, the people who have experienced a recent loss, for example, a death in the family or divorce, a serious illness or injury, are much, much more likely to be victims of fraud. Why is that? It's because dealing with this loss takes off a lot of cognitive capacity in your mind, and it's going to be very hard for you to pay attention to what's happening around. I remember that I once spoke to a customer of one of the merchants of Riskified, who was 70 years old, who was victim of social engineering with gift cards, and he was telling to us that why the fraud was going on against him. His wife was in the hospital with a very serious fall, and he just really couldn't pay attention to what was happening, but he registered that there was some issue, and he realized that with money it can be fixed, and he just wanted to be with his wife. And he lost a very serious amount of money to fraud because he didn't have the cognitive ability, the free space in his mind to deal with it. And the last one, which is also very easy to understand, is that people who are looking for a bargain all the time are going to be very willing to believe things that are just too good to be true. They're like, oh, maybe it is not too good to be true. So this is one. These are the personality types that make you likely to be a victim of fraud, but there are things that make you likely to be victims, even that are not personality types. And these are the underprivileged communities that are much more likely to fall victim of fraud. They are overrepresented in the victims. They're underreported in the cases. So why are they underreported? One of the reasons is that even if people report the fraud against them to the financial institutions, most financial institutions are not obligatory reporters to the law enforcement agencies, and sometimes there are contradicting interests. The financial institute doesn't actually want to report it to the law enforcement agency because it will look bad on them. So the police, the FBI, have a very hard time actually understanding how much fraud is going against. People are very, very ashamed. Being victims of fraud is something that's very shameful, something that's very embarrassing. So they are not going to report it. Sometimes people don't even know that they were victims of fraud. They don't realize what has happened. And one thing that, especially when we are going to go into these minorities, we will see that a lot of these minorities are, because of other reasons, are very distrustful of the legal system, of law enforcement, of the government. They might have problematic immigration status that stops them from reporting the fraud, and that makes them an ideal victim to fraudsters and ongoing scams. So two things that are important to say is that people with limited numerical skills and people who are heavily indebted and they have nothing to lose are very likely to fall victim to scams and like get rich fast scams or work from home scams, which is very easy to understand why. It's very, very difficult for them. People who are in debt, more debt that they can comfortably handle, they are very likely to go into any scam that offers an out from their life situation. The elderly is a community that we talk a lot about when we talk about fraud, right? The elderly who are around 2 times more likely to be victims of financial fraud, and they are likely to be victims of violent offenses. In the general community, just so you know, like the general population, it's around the same. You're around as likely to be a victim of a violent offense as to be a victim of fraud. But for the elderly, it's 2 times more likely to be a victim of fraud. And there's a lot of reasons for that. The elderly tend to fall into 2 categories, either to people who have a very serious saving accounts, especially in America, the boomer generation. They're sitting sometimes on millions of dollars. And the other end of the spectrum, where a lot of elderly falls, is the very poor communities. So as we spoke about, very poor communities who have nothing to lose, whose life situation seems hopeless, are very likely to fall victim of fraud. And of course, if you are rich and you have a lot of money, then you are a very great target for fraudsters also. The elderly is a community who very often does not realize that they have been defrauded, especially if they are defrauded by family members. And another thing that happens with the elderly is that there is a decline in cognitive function. We can see that as the cognitive functions decline, you're more likely to fall victim for fraud. But there is, with elderly, and that's something that we actually know about from our families, a lot of times overconfidence about their abilities. They don't realize that their cognitive abilities are declining, so they're even more likely to fall victim. Racial minorities, especially the African American and the Latin American communities in America, are very likely to be, they are way overrepresented amongst fraud victims. But especially in these communities, I don't have to explain the political situation. There's a huge distrust towards the law enforcement agencies, so they almost never report this. You can see research done by the FTC based on zip codes, where based on zip codes you can see which community is dominant in which place and how much fraud reports are coming in. You can see that they are very seriously under-reporting fraud. And the things that are very likely to affect them is that, for example, fake English courses offered to the Latino American community, a lot of consumer fraud, work from home scams. And the last thing I really want to talk about, because I think it's something that we don't really talk about in the fraud writer community a lot, is that the LGBTQIA community is also much more likely to fall victim of fraud. And it's true because every vulnerable community is likely to fall victim. For example, in Ireland, there is a scam going around on Grindr, which is a dating app in the queer community, where you set up a date, you meet someone, you set up a date, and they ask for your identity number to check it against the sexual predator list, which seems very innocent to be asked. Like, you can understand you are coming from a vulnerable community where a lot of violent offenses, and then it's actually just stealing your identity number, stealing your identity, and it's using the vulnerability of the community against the community. The fact that they are under constant attack is what's being used against them. So I want to show you here a story. It's one of my favorite fraud stories from Riskified, and it's going to include a lot of things. One of the victims of this story, the she in the story, let's call her Susan, is is an underprivileged, late middle-aged woman living in one of the southern states of America, with a very low income, who said, and this story that you see on the screen is something that was told by her after the merchant has reached out to her. So what happened is that she tells the story that she met this guy called Kevin on one of the dating sites, and one of the worst dating sites that you probably don't even know about it, unless because of fraud reasons. And she said that they started with Kevin, they started talking, they talked for a couple months, but they never met, and it didn't actually work out. But then Kevin told her that he actually volunteers for a homeless shelter in Malaysia. And since Susan is such a nice person, what she should do is that Kevin will give her a credit card number. She should order a very expensive and, as we know, very easy to resell product to herself, and then just send it to Malaysia. Like the package, Susan makes the order online, she gets the package, and then she repackages it and sends it to Kuala Lumpur, the forwarding address that Kevin provided to her. And also the credit card number was provided by Kevin. And then Susan got $120 MoneyGram to her after she sent the packages. Now, for us, this story, for me, this story sounds insane, and it's very clear to me that there is fraudulent activity going on. But Susan didn't realize that she was a pawn in a scam. She did not realize she was part of fraud until us, through the merchant, reached out to her and asked her what has happened. And then she stopped talking to Kevin. She was still talking to Kevin and changed her phone number and reported it to FBI. But I think it shows very well that how underprivileged communities, people who are vulnerable, are very likely to fall victim and not even know that they were part of a fraud story here. And we have seen this a lot with sweetheart scams, where people fall in love with someone online and then that person starts having very serious money problems. We see it with APP, with authorized push payments fraud in the banking industry, where you are told that your account has been compromised and you have to transfer all of your money to a new account. We see it, and you will see that all of these frauds that are much more sophisticated, much nicer in my eyes, are much more likely to target communities that are already struggling. And now there is another survey, because we are now getting to the Corona part of the talk. And you are going to be asked, like, how do you think Corona has affected the fraud world? Yeah. So this is not a multiple choice question. Wow, 62 people. We're very excited about the survey. Okay, so absolutely you are right. Fraud has increased throughout Corona, and it is because people are online more. So really what you think about Corona is that how you feel throughout Corona, how lost you feel, and how you don't know what's happening in the world, and how you are just eager for any information, and how you are easy to fall for all the articles that are saying also A and also B. Just think about how we thought about wearing masks a couple months ago. We thought like, oh, we don't have to. There was that research that said we don't have to wear masks. And now we are all wearing masks, but we are also not wearing masks because like it's only if you are sick or the other person is sick. This is how people in underprivileged communities feel like and live their lives every time. During Corona, you can see that people are online more. A lot of people have to enter the online world the first time, have to enter merchants, have to enter online systems that they have not done before. A lot of new customers are created, and at the same time, a lot of dormant accounts are coming legitimately alive. But it's a great opportunity for the fraudsters to attack you, especially because people are uncomfortable, they are vulnerable, people are under stress. A lot of people are looking for work from home opportunities. A lot of people are under financial stress, which will cause a rise in mules and in other scams. You can see that, for example, in India, where people are actually completely housebound, there is a phishing scam going around where you're offered a free Netflix account. Seems so great, right? When you're housebound, you only have to send this WhatsApp message to your 10 other people. In South Africa, fraudsters are walking around and taking your actual physical money, saying it was contaminated with corona, and the government is going to send you clean banknotes, but of course the clean banknotes are never coming. And all over the world, the Interpol is saying is that there's a lot of social engineering where you are being told that one of your relatives is sick and in hospital, and they're requesting money or payment for the medical expenses. It's something that us in Israel understand a little bit less, because our healthcare system is not as much privatized as in, let's say, in the US. But in the US, it's something that's very, very, very common at the moment, and a lot of people are falling victim to it. So what can we do to stop it? So when we talk about these fraud stories, traditional data points are a little bit less useful. Simple models cannot stop these fraud attacks. You have to look into behavior analysis. You have to look into spending patterns. Behavior analysis can be very, very helpful, because this is something, these are people who are under stress, and you are being told and you are being asked to do something that is because all of your accounts has been compromised. You are under stress and you are behaving like someone who is under stress. You are clicking sometimes faster, sometimes much slower. It's very good to look at these. Another thing that's very important is cooperation, merchants, fraud prevention companies, banks. We have to work together in order to stop these organizations. Community outreach. So, for example, I have talked to a lot of merchants who have then reached out to their customers, who have then changed their website. We have to educate the public about the common scams, and we have to educate the public about how not to fall victim and how to realize when they are being played. The last thing is that sometimes you have to go against your business interests. So, for example, Riskified, we do representment. Representment means that after an order came back as a chargeback, you can submit a dispute on it, try to get back the money from the customer. So by definition, by business policy, Riskify does not represent fraudulent chargebacks that we believe are fraudulent, even if it's a great scam, and it would be very easy for us to win, because all the data points are saying that the credit card owner placed the order, because actually the credit card owner placed the order. If we believe it was fraudulent because the credit card owner was scammed, then we do not represent these chargebacks, and Riskify spends the expenses. So I want all of you to take this home with you, because really you are the strongest link. This is all of our social responsibility to protect these communities. You and I, and we have to take a step to protect all of these communities. We should make business decisions that also protect the underprivileged communities, and we should be educating all of our partners and business partners about the importance of outreach and the importance of cooperation to work together so we can protect these communities. Because again, the strongest link is you, and I really believe that this is our job and this is our privilege to work for this. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Reka. Bravo.